nice?
You weren't supposed to relieve me.
I know, but I felt like taking a shift.
You like him, don't you? You like watching him.
Don't be ridiculous.
We're gonna kill him. You understand that?
Morpheus believes he is the one.
Do you?
It doesn't matter what I believe.
You don't, do you?
Did you hear that?
Hear what?
Are you sure this line is clean?
Yeah, of course I'm sure.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
But the king was jealous of the success of the colonies and their paper-based fiat money system, which was not backed by precious metals. Life in Georgian England was an entirely different story. High taxation meant the prisons were filled with debtors, and the streets were filled with unemployed beggars with little hope of escape. The taxes paid to the king barely covered the interest payment on the debts he owed to Mayor Amschel Rothschild. With the wealthy in England overtaxed, King George turned to the colonists by requiring all taxes to be paid in gold coins rather than colonial script. Since the colonists had very little gold, unemployment and cries for war soon surfaced. Benjamin Franklin later said that this was the true cause of the war, not the tax on tea or the Stamp Act as taught in the history books over and over again. Violent opposition soon broke out, forcing King George to send English soldiers to enforce the new taxes. When these troops refused to fire on British citizens, the king agreed to let Mayor Rothschild purchase German Hessian troops as mercenary fighters dressed in British uniforms to collect his debt for him. When it became clear these Hessian troops could not successfully defeat the Continental Army, King George finally relinquished and said, "We may have lost the colony, but we will get her back." To bring the colonists to their knees, Mayor Rothschild proposed a novel idea. He would loan money to the Continental Army through British Rothschild agents in France in order to control them. From that point on, England stopped trying to divide and conquer America through force, but instead chose to retake her colonies through the stealth of divide and control. To implement this new policy, he recruited a network of British spies still loyal to the crown to infiltrate and guide the new republic's government into the hands of British bankers. In 1788, before the United States even existed, British war loans were now coming due. Because the federal government had no significant financial resources to pay these loans, they declared bankruptcy and placed the debt on the states instead of the people. To make the war debt pending against the people, in 1790, Congress passed an act making a provision for the payment of the debt of the United States. This act abolished states of the Republic and created federal districts in their place. A portion of the war debts was then placed in each one of these districts. Soon after, all the states and citizens were reorganized as corporations, and as a corporation, you are not subject to the Bill of Rights. This may explain why you feel like you have no rights under the Constitution. It's because you don't. You are not subject to it. Even though the colonists had removed British troops from their lands, they were now at the mercy of British bankers. After defaulting on their war debts, one of President Washington's first acts in power was to declare a financial emergency. Desperate for funds, the United States allowed the creation of a private central bank, controlled by the Bank of England and the Rothschild family, by pledging the assets and securities of the United States as collateral. Despite the protests of the Democrats and Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson, Washington recruited the aid of Alexander Hamilton, who was Secretary of Treasury and a Rothschild agent, to draft a proposal which in 1791 became the Bank of the United States. Just like the Bank of England, which was also privately owned, the Bank of the United States was named in such a way to conceal its true ownership. This bank was given a 20-year charter and capitalized with $10 million, 80% of which was owned by foreign bankers. Using fractional reserve banking, the bank was authorized to loan out twice as much money as it had in reserves, or $20 million. This made a profitable enterprise for the bankers, as they could collect interest on an extra $10 million that was simply manufactured out of thin air. By 1796, the national debt of the United States government had grown to $6.2 million, forcing the government to sell most of its own shares in the Bank of the United States. By 1802, the government owned no stock in its own bank. With the outbreak of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe in 1803, the relationship between the United States and Great Britain had begun to deteriorate. Britain had imposed a blockade on all neutral countries, including the United States. During this time, Britain was taking American sailors as hostages from their ships to serve in the British Navy. In response to this increasing infiltration of troublemakers and a host of British spies within the United States, Congress passed an amendment which prevented anyone who held titles of nobility or connections to the Crown of England from holding public office, such as esquire, attorney, doctor, and clergyman. These titles were authorized under the Crown of England for English citizens, and thus these holders are foreign agents of the Crown. The Titles of Nobility Amendment, also known as the 13th Amendment, was approved by Congress in the House of Representatives in 1810. It was ratified by all the necessary states into law on March 12, 1819. It reads as follows: If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them, or either of them. Titles of Nobility Amendment, 1810.